The idea was grand. It was more than just a piece of furniture. It was supposed to be my masterpiece, the ultimate command center for my workshop. I imagined a massive desk, stretching nearly wall to wall. It would have built-in drawers for all my tools, clever compartments for screws and hardware, and a huge, smooth top for assembling projects. This wasn't just a desk, it was a statement. It was meant to prove that I had moved beyond simple birdhouses and cutting boards. I felt like I was ready to tackle something truly complex, a project that would define my skills and organize my entire creative space in one fell swoop. My sketchbook filled up with excited drawings. I spent hours sketching out every little detail. I drew the joinery, planned the drawer slides, and imagined the perfect finish. Each line I drew on the paper felt like a step closer to making this dream a reality. I was buzzing with a kind of creative energy that every woodworker knows. It's that feeling you get when a project takes over your thoughts. I showed the plans to my wife, pointing out the clever features and explaining how it would transform the garage. My confidence was soaring. In my mind, the desk was already built, and I was already using it. This project felt like a big test. It was a chance to use all the techniques I had been learning. I wanted to try dovetail joints for the drawers, even though I had only practiced them once or twice. I wanted to laminate the top for a thick, sturdy surface. Success meant I was a real woodworker. It meant I could build anything I could imagine. The stakes felt incredibly high, not for anyone else, but for myself. I had tied so much of my personal pride and woodworking identity to the successful completion of this one overly ambitious project. It was my Mount Everest of woodworking, and I was ready to start climbing. So, I headed to the home center, plans in hand and a big smile on my face. I bought a stack of the most affordable 3/4-inch plywood I could find. It was a little warped, but I figured I could flatten it out. I also bought a box of basic wood screws and some cheap drawer slides. I thought I was being smart and saving money. My plan was to build the two main cabinet bases first, then connect them with a long top. The design seemed solid in my head. I thought, how hard can it be? It's just a bunch of boxes screwed together. I was about to learn a very hard lesson about plans, materials, and wishful thinking. The first mistake became obvious almost immediately, though I chose to ignore it. The plywood I bought was a disaster. It was far from flat, and as I started cutting my large pieces for the cabinet sides, I noticed they had a distinct curve to them. Instead of stopping and getting better material, I pushed forward. I told myself that once I started assembling the boxes, the screws would pull everything straight and square. This was a critical error in judgment. You can't force warped wood to be straight. It will always fight back, and it will always win. The foundation of my entire project was literally bent from the start. My second big mistake was in the design itself. I had designed the desk to be nearly 12 feet long. The plan was to support this massive span with just the two cabinet bases at each end and a single support in the middle. I didn't do any research on load bearing or the properties of plywood over a long distance. I just assumed it would be strong enough because it felt heavy. During the build, as I laid the first sheet of the top across the cabinets, I could already see a slight sag in the middle. It was a small dip, but it was a clear warning sign that my design was structurally weak. My excitement blinded me to this obvious flaw. The joinery was another area where my ambition outpaced my skill. I had decided on using fancy joints to show off, but I didn't have the patience to do them right. My attempted dovetails for the drawers looked more like jagged teeth. They were loose and sloppy. Frustrated, I gave up and decided to just use screws and glue for everything. But I was in a hurry. I didn't use enough clamps, and I didn't wait for the glue to fully cure before moving on to the next step. Every connection was weaker than it should have been. I was building a house of cards, one poorly joined piece at a time. As I attached the drawer slides, the problems multiplied. Because the cabinet boxes weren't perfectly square, thanks to the warped plywood, the slides didn't line up correctly. The drawers would stick, jam, and sit crooked in their openings. I spent hours trying to adjust them, getting more and more frustrated with each failed attempt. I should have stopped right there and reevaluated everything. I should have realized that all these small problems were symptoms of a much bigger issue, but I was too far in. I just wanted to get it finished, so I kept pushing forward, ignoring every red flag the project threw at me. The moment of truth arrived on a Saturday afternoon. The desk was, for the most part, assembled. It stood there in my garage, long and wobbly, a monument to my impatience. The top was sagging noticeably, the drawers were a mess, but it was standing. I decided to load it up to see how it would hold my tools. I started with a few power tools, placing my miter saw near the middle. I added a drill press, some hand planes, and a few heavy boxes of screws. With each item I added, I could hear the wood groaning softly, a quiet protest that I chose to ignore. Then, it happened. It wasn't a loud explosion. It started with a sickening crack. It was the sound of tortured plywood giving up. I looked down and saw the long top begin to bow downwards at an alarming rate. The single support in the middle buckled, and then the entire 12-foot span folded in on itself like a piece of paper. The desk collapsed into the center with a thunderous crash. The miter saw and drill press slammed onto the concrete floor. Drawers burst open, sending screws and hardware scattering across the entire garage. It was complete and total structural failure. For a few moments, I just stood there in stunned silence. Dust filled the air. My masterpiece, the project that was supposed to prove my skills, was now a pathetic pile of splintered wood and broken dreams on the floor. The first emotion that washed over me was pure disbelief, quickly followed by a hot wave of anger and embarrassment. I was angry at the wood, angry at my tools, but mostly, I was furious with myself. I felt like a complete failure. All that time, money, and energy had resulted in nothing but a giant, dangerous mess that I now had to clean up. The disappointment was heavy. It felt like more than just a failed project. It felt like a personal failing. I had been so confident, so sure of myself, and now I was faced with the undeniable evidence of my own arrogance and lack of skill. Cleaning up the wreckage was a slow and somber process. Each broken piece of plywood I picked up felt like a reminder of a specific mistake I had made. The warped panel, the weak joint, the sagging top, it was all there in the debris. My workshop command center was now just a pile of expensive firewood. I closed the garage door and walked away, feeling utterly defeated. After a few days of avoiding my garage, I finally went back in and looked at the pile of wood with fresh eyes. The anger had faded, replaced by a quiet determination. This failure wasn't an end, it was a lesson. The most important thing I learned was the value of patience and precision. My rush to finish had been my undoing. I realized that woodworking isn't a race. It's a slow, deliberate process where every step builds upon the last. If your foundation is crooked, the whole structure will be crooked. I promised myself that from then on, I would measure twice, cut once, and never ever rush the glue up. The disaster also taught me a crucial lesson about materials. Trying to save a few dollars on cheap warped plywood cost me the entire project. Good projects start with good materials. It's as simple as that. I learned to inspect every board at the lumber yard, to understand wood movement, and to choose the right material for the job, not just the cheapest. I also learned to respect the limits of my materials. I now research structural designs and never just assume a piece of wood can handle a certain load. That sagging top was a physics lesson I would never forget. Adapting to the reality of your materials is key. This epic fail completely changed my approach to woodworking. I started smaller. I went back to basics and practiced my joinery on scrap wood until I could do it right. My next project was a simple, small workbench built with quality plywood and proper joinery. I took my time. I made sure every cut was perfect and every joint was square and strong. When it was finished, it was solid as a rock. That small success rebuilt my confidence more than the giant desk ever could have. The lessons from the collapse were directly responsible for the success of every project that followed. In the end, I'm glad I failed so spectacularly. That pile of splinters taught me more about woodworking than any successful project ever could have. It taught me humility, patience, and the importance of a solid plan. For anyone out there starting a new hobby, I want you to know that you will fail. You will make mistakes. You will create your own pile of splinters, but don't let it discourage you. Embrace it. Learn from it. Because failure is not the opposite of success. It's a part of it. It's the best teacher you'll ever have on your journey to becoming a master of your craft.